I think what you talked about there about rejection and the feeling of rejection is very real. It doesn't matter what stage of the industry you're at, whether you were working on a small project, a big project, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Rejection always feels bad, but it's a process that you have to go through in order to get success, you know.
Welcome to the series in which I, Jason Verney, filmmaker, video artist and writer, introduce to you interesting individuals from the world of filmmaking. In this fourth episode, we talk to Gareth Brown, co-founder of the production company Flyer Films, and amongst other subjects touched on, we discuss the ups and downs of the film festival circuit, the very real issue of rejection, and what those with funding monies look for in a film, story or overall concept. Finally. Yeah, so it feels like, I was thinking this earlier, it feels like I met you more than once, but it was because I met you more than once at the same festival.
I think so. Yeah, I think we just met each other multiple times in Kingston.
Yeah, that's it. Where are you now, by the way? Where are you? Canada? England?
England. Yeah. Place called Wargrave, just outside Henley-on-Thames.
Yes. Yeah, you went to Cannes, didn't you?
Yeah, I was in Cannes until Saturday night, and then now I'm back here. So.
Oh, yeah. How was that? Because I've heard it's, sorry, we'll get started, but I've heard it's very but not regimented, but very split. Certain places you can go, certain places you can't. But I mean, some festivals are like that, obviously. But is it? How is it generally?
Yes and no. It depends what you're going for. So, like you say, it's a festival of many parts. So, for us as Flyer Films, Cannes very much a meeting place and somewhere that you're going to meet people that come together from all over the world that you otherwise just don't get the opportunity to meet in person unless you travel to their office. But so if everyone's in the same place, it makes it easy to network, to make new connections, and to new collaboration possibilities, really. There obviously is the film festival side of it as well, with all the screenings and the red carpet and everything else. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been to an actual screening. It's just so busy with meetings and everything else going on at the same time that to find time to go to a screening is quite difficult. And like you say, some passes will let you into the screening, some won't. So it depends exactly what access you've got. But also there's a ballot for the tickets and the screening. So if you're not sure that you're going to be free, or you want to keep your calendar free for something else, then you don't end up really bidding for the tickets. But yeah, it's just the whole town gets taken over by the film festival. Everything gets very expensive.
Yeah. No, I've heard it's expensive in general.
It's not outside of the festival-wise that it's so expensive. But hotels that are normally €50 a night are €400 a night. It's that kind of stupidity.
Yeah.
You can get lucky. You can find an Airbnb and book in there for the week, and there's some. If you share with somebody else, it's not too expensive. So you can make. So you go to the.
So you go to the kind of film market part. Is it the film? What they call the film market?
Yeah.
Or the where you promote, where you're selling. People are selling ideas to one another, that kind of thing. Yeah. Or you're going to a mix of the films as well. I don't know what your pass was.
For me, personally, it's mostly the market. Like I say, I haven't been to a screening other than one that's free on the beach when we were free one evening and wanted something to do. So, for us, it's mostly the market, networking, business meetings, those kind of things.
Okay. It reminds me a bit the one I've been to almost repeatedly is the Busan International Film Festival in Korea. It's Asia's biggest one. So I'm thinking like that. I've never been to Cannes. I've got a film review website, Mini Movie, and I'm very good friends with the people that write for Asian cinema in the UK. And they're always going to Udine. Mm-hmm. They're always going different places, and I kind of envy. I could have done that as well, but I want to follow my filmmaking side more than, that. I have to leave that behind at some point. So I was going to ask you first of all, anyway, so I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. Obviously, I know who you are, but Gareth Brown. But I wondered if you could introduce or just mention a bit of the origin? How I've heard a bit from yourself and maybe from Thida, but I can't remember. But it was a kind of an accidental startup, wasn't it? Like, as in how it came about. I mean, I don't know if you can just elaborate on that, how Flyer Films came about.
Yeah, so
Is that something you did?
yeah, I'm Gareth Brown, one of the founders and head of production at Flyer Films. Like you say, it was an accidental coming together, really. I started out in the engineering industry. I worked in automotive and through product strategy and project management. Came into the industry through my partner, Katia Shannon, who is a writer, director, occasional producer, and she got me into it really through her first short film, Standstill. She was making that. Production company dropped out because they couldn't get some funding that they needed, and she said, "Oh, you know, how do you fancy being a producer?" So I cautiously said yes, probably before knowing anything about production at all. And we sat down and worked through everything, made a big project plan on the wall of our living room. And that's how it started. We started Fly Films through Standstill. That was back in 2018. We've made another 4 films since then, all shorts, although we've worked on features independently, both in Canada and the UK outside of that, albeit not under the Flyer Films banner. So for us right now, going forwards, we're looking to grow Flyer Films into the feature market and looking for international co-production opportunity that we could support with, because essentially our skill sets sit with knowing the production market in Canada, knowing the production market in the UK, and now we want to bring the two together in the middle. So we kind of have that unique knowledge in a way that we understand the Canadian rules, which can be quite complex with federal, provincial tax credits and interrelations. So we're kind of the structural part in the middle of those projects that we're working on now.
There must be quite a lot in Canada. There must be quite a lot of production companies, independent and non-independent in Canada, I would have thought, just because of where it is.
Yeah, there are a lot of production companies in Canada. And the UK, obviously, it's massively busy in the UK, albeit mostly from outside investment. So the domestic independent film market in the UK shrunk massively. It was 400 million annual spend back in 2018 when we first started. Now we're down to 100 million in 2022 from the BFI's figures. So it's getting much, much smaller. The co-production market's pretty much consistent, actually growing slightly. So it had its biggest ever spend year on co-production last year. The number of productions is roughly the same, so the budget level of co-productions is growing. But what you really see the uptick in is for outside money coming into the UK to film, as you probably see through Disney, Netflix. All the studios are busy; they're all full the whole time. Lots of crew, lots of jobs. People are investing in new studio lots. You see lots of businesses popping up around rentals and things like that. Even companies that have done rentals in other sectors, like construction, coming into the film market as well. So there's a lot of new business really in film in the UK. And co-production wise between the UK and Canada, the UK has been Canada's biggest co-production market for the last, I don't even know how long, 20 years plus. It dipped off a little bit at the end of EIS, but we're still looking at 10 co-productions a year with Canada.
Okay. Because I mean, it is with the UK, just to go off topic a little bit, it does always make me laugh or make me, I don't know, think a lot. Like South Korea has all these films coming out. It's a similar sized country to the UK, but we might be doing all this in the background, but we don't see the films, the big films. I mean, I'm not saying they have to be big films, but it gives you an indication of what there is. I don't see many British features coming to British cinemas. No. But in, let's just say, Korea, which is, a homogenized country, stuff.
Yeah.
The big, what they call, the big sort of corporations fund it there. So that's the difference, I think. But I don't, maybe Canada and UK work in that way, in the fact that they've got big companies with the cogs, pushing things.
It's both sides. In the UK, independent cinema, like you say, very few independent films actually make the screen, which is why I think we're seeing that lower level of investment because investors are becoming more reluctant to invest in UK independent domestic film. We have an obsession as British people with the Americans. So unless you've got an American in the story or an American is part of the story or something like that, it struggles in the cinema. And it struggles to get off the ground. There are a few that have cinema runs. I can think of a local production here called Little English that was made with a not-for-profit organisation that we've done some work with on our last film as an in-between, but they had a cinema run that they're just coming to the end of, and that was quite successful. But like you say, they're very few and far between. It almost has to have a different twist. And for some reason, British people don't like watching British content, other than on the TV, like the BBC and Channel 4, Film 4, all fund British content. Whereas in the cinema market, for some reason, we don't want to go to the cinema to watch English people, which actually seems to be different in Canada. British films seem to do quite well over there. They have a bit of a liking the other way around. So that's quite nice for us, especially as a co-production, because you get as a co-production, you get two domestic marketplaces.
Yeah. And I guess French films in Canada do quite well as well, perhaps because of the French, infusion.
Very much so, especially in Quebec. I mean, you can have French language films in Quebec that will make quite a lot of profit just by being distributed in Quebec alone. So that's another market too. Yeah. They tend to stay amongst themselves, though. They tend to be domestic productions in the French language, unless you confuse with France. But.
Yeah, my co-host of the Not So Korean podcast, another thing I do, he's Canadian. He's often spoken a little bit about, how it is over there. In fact, we've just been speaking about another independent film that Mubi have just got, which is Return to Seoul. It did really well at Cannes. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't heard of it specifically.
But, it's a very good film. I'll send you a link maybe later. What was I going to say? Yeah, because when I was looking at the Facebook for Flyer Films, I did see about Standstill, but when I saw it, it was 2021. Yeah. And it said, we've now got our firstborn one. I thought, hang on, so that's only a year and a half ago, but you said it was 2018. So is that because that was when the Facebook page was set up? Or is that because it wasn't when you when you commissioned it, when you were involved with the production, that was 3 years before?
Correct, exactly. So for short, we've been very lucky that our shorts have had good festival runs. Unfortunately, what that means is you can't release the films while they're still playing in the festivals. So we finished that film we shot the film in 2018. It premiered mid-2019 at Calgary Film Festival. And then it was playing all the way through until 2021 in March 21, I think it had its last festival screening. So we released it for World Diabetes Day in 2021 online with Omeletto. So we partnered up with those guys. It's on YouTube. You can go and watch it. Standstill, Omeletto, you'll find it. So yeah, it takes quite a long time sometimes to go from production into free distribution. If we're just having another similar discussion with a slightly later film that we shot in 2020 that we're now looking at putting online or distributing. We've had an offer from a distributor to potentially sell it to airlines and SVOD and different places, but that would then restrict us from doing that online launch even further. They might put it behind a paywall for a while, but we've got to think about where the audience is for that film. Do we send it free to view online ourselves, or do we want to get some recoupment maybe through the distributor? The short film market can be a little bit strange like that. It depends where things happen, but it can make those timelines quite long.
And you said that you said you've done 3 or 4 films, and I found some information about those. I think all of them. One of them, are they all features, or did you say one was a short, or 2 were short?
They're all short.
All shorts. I thought there was you've got a feature on the horizon. Is that what you said? You said something about a feature, I think, earlier.
Exactly. So at the moment, all of our films that we've made as a company are shorts, but as individuals, we've worked on features elsewhere. So now as a company, we're picking up a feature to work on as a co-production, because we've worked on features. We're currently working on a feature between British Columbia and Quebec in Canada. And we've worked on others both in Canada and in the UK. So now as a company, we want to bring our our individual knowledge into that space and grow the company.
Oh, excellent. And because that's leading me to the question that I saw, and I hadn't seen this before. I haven't gone to loads of different producers' websites anyway lately, but it said it included views for one of them for TikTok. Now I know that's short form, but that's very short form, and I thought it said it had so many views, and I mean literally, was it millions of views? And I thought
it's about 3 million that it had on TikTok.
But how long is the film, and does that count for the whole film, or is that only a minute? Because I don't know. You can do minute films, but yeah.
So that's it's a funny story, really. As I say, we released Standstill on Omeletto, and we're watching the Omeletto views go up, and it's going 30,000, 40,000. And then our composer sends us a link and says, I think you should see this. And we click on the link, and it takes us to TikTok. And somebody's ripped our film off YouTube and posted it on TikTok over 4 parts. The film itself is about 15 minutes. And they'd split the film into small chunks and posted it on TikTok. And it has millions of views on every video, and 20, 30,000 comments next to it. So people are watching it because the comments are relevant to the content that they're watching. Obviously, some people aren't going to watch the whole movie, but even the very segment, exactly, but it gets smaller and smaller. So you can see how many people finish in the last segment. But it's an interesting platform because we got no comeback from that at all. It's on somebody else's account. We tried to contact them and say, hey, do you mind just putting a link on the bottom? Give us some credit. Don't mind that you're posting it. But radio silence. They blocked me. It's a weird world out there. And then you're in the mind.
They blocked
it. Do you report
it's amazing.
Or you just let it happen? And to be honest, for that film, as long as it reached its audience, was essentially targeted towards people with diabetes worldwide. That's why we launched it on World Diabetes Day. So people were accessing the content. So
exactly. If it's doing good, it's like for charity. You can't really stop people from sharing a good deed. It's kind of a good deed. So if people have got to part 4 or segment 4, then that's a good sign that they're interested in it. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah. So what was I going to say? Yeah, so funding. Now, the reason I say that is because obviously you've done short films. So when you do venture to the next thing of feature, I know myself and Thida, we're quite interested in, how the funding system works with, well, actually a mixture of things like documentaries, features, but short films. So I wondered, you being relatively new to this, you've obviously done well. So where did your background for the funding come from? I think I've heard a story about when you fell into this. It's to do with fundraising. But if someone approached you with a film idea and it's a short film, how do you go about? So probably 2 questions here. How do you go about raising the funds, or do you just work with them to show them how to raise the funds? I guess
really raising the funds is the job of the producer. It's probably worth splitting this up for different categories because it's obviously very different to raise financing for a feature, whether that's fiction and doc, they're 2 separate strands, and also a short. So for the shorts that we've done in the past, we've worked predominantly with soft money. The BFI Network funded our last film. Our very first film was funded by the Conseil des Arts et Lettres du Québec, so CALC as they're known, which is a similar type of fund in Canada. And in between that, we've funded some as well. So we've done other jobs that have brought some money in, and then we put that money into funding the film. So it can be a combination of, there's script competitions, there's film festivals have prizes, there's obviously crowdfunding, other governmental organizations, your own money. So for short films, it really is a combination deal of what you can find and what you feel fits the film and how much money you need, ultimately. Because we made one short film for, overall spend was 3,000 in the end. It wasn't very big. So between ourselves and another production company, we put in half each and made the film. everyone gets paid at that. It was a 1-day shoot. It was one room, very contained film, 4 minutes long.
Do you get situations where people are crowdfunding and then they get in touch with you, that kind of thing?
Some people already have financing to a certain extent. Some people, it's their first draft. I'd always advise, if you're going to approach a producer, probably come with something that's a bit more developed than your first draft. Have a couple of people look at it. Unless it's a bigger idea and a feature and you want development money, then obviously going at it with an earlier stage idea and pitch deck, mood board, that kind of thing is absolutely fine. But then obviously you're looking at development funding, so that's a different mechanism entirely again.
Yeah, so when you sometimes have to co-fund, you mentioned earlier co-funding, I think, co-production. I mean, to me, it's one and the same, yeah, I guess. But how many is them? You see it on a lot of films, the pre-credits, you've got like maybe up to 20, no, that's an exaggeration, but up to 10 different independent film companies. So what's the most you've ever sort of been a part of? It's been 7 of them to get all together, or?
For us, 3 or 4, I would say. So yeah, for us, I think that the most individual parties that we've worked with to date is 3 or 4. That's predominantly because we've worked on shorts, but even the feature that we're working on now, I suppose that's 5 or 6. I'm trying to think of the list now. I've got the finance plan in my head, but that's a combination of, so the funding for that feature is a combination of telefilm, the equivalent to the BFI in Canada, private investment, producer reinvestments, so where you pay yourself a salary, but you say, actually, I'm going to put some of that back into the film, tax relief, and that's both federal tax relief and provincial tax relief as well. So there's a number of different parties, and a broadcaster. So there's a number of different parties that come together to put that money in, and it all comes at different stages through the production. So you end up with a waterfall for your cash flow, and ultimately to fill in the blanks, you need to go to the bank and get a loan, which is relatively straightforward in Canada. More difficult in the UK. There are banks that do it in the UK, but much more reluctant now than they used to be.
Yeah, not to show my age, but I remember you could go into a bank and you know your bank manager. They'd give you a loan. Now it's impossible. I mean, not that I've had credit cards galore in the past, so I'm not a good advert really, but there was a time when you could. I was going to say, so just going back to the Canada UK thing, how do you split your time, and why do you end up over there and the UK? Because I haven't really gone behind the scenes of that. What's the reason for that again? And how do you split it? And do you prefer being over there? Or?
That's a big question. So the way we divide it really is that my partner Katia is Canadian, so she runs the Canadian side, I run the UK side, mostly. We work on each other's stuff. There is a bit of crossover there, but predominantly I run my films in the UK, she runs it in Canada. The beauty of the modern world, just like we're doing right now, and on Zoom, you're in Thailand, I'm in the UK, is that a lot of work can be done remotely. So a lot of the time we're in the UK, sometimes we're in Canada. It just depends where the work is, really, and what we've got to do. So yeah, we split the time that way, and in terms of how we structure a project, that'll depend on what benefits the project the most, as to whether we structure it. Maybe we've got another UK producer that wants to do something with Canada, and we'll work through the Canadian side. Yeah, Canada wants to work through the UK side. We're lucky that we're national. Well, I'm national in the UK, she is in Canada, and we can work in them both. So filmmaking-wise, it's nice to have that duality, and it's nice to be able to link them together. The co-production treaty between Canada and the UK is very strong and gives you a lot of possibilities. Plus, also the markets are quite complementary in terms of the skill sets of the workforce. So you can often add value to a project by linking the two sides together.
Yeah, I was just going to return to the question relating to funding. I'm sure listeners that we have would like to know how to approach a company like Flyer Films, and how do you get most of the people contacting you, for funding? Because I guess is there actually a database that lists all potential producers? There's not. I mean, there's IMDb, there's Film Freeway.
There's Pact as well for the UK anyway. So if you're a member, if you paid
right, I see
on that database. So it's worth looking at the Pact's independent producers list.
Yeah.
How to receive content and ideas it's interesting because everybody prefers them in different ways. I've spoken to producers that are just like, no, don't send me anything, I'll find you. And other people that prefer getting an email. I get stuff through, there's a form on our website that a lot of people fill out and just reach out that way, which is quite a nice way if you can't find my email or you know where our website is, so you can go there and send something through our contact form. There's also Sinando as well. Internally, a lot of projects and work comes through things like Cannes festivals, meeting people. A lot of business is done through relationships and trust, right? So you've got to be able to trust the people that you're working with, both if you're a writer or director with your producer, and also as a producer working with other producers or with that writer-director. You've got to have that synergy and something that works as a relationship. So it might take a little bit of time to grow that relationship, more so than just sending a script. I'd be reluctant to send a script straight away. Introduce yourself, say hello, build a relationship, and because maybe what you're sending isn't what we're looking for, isn't what somebody else is looking for, and it just ends up in the bin. And you spent all that time writing that really lovely email selling your project, but it might not be worth that time. But I'll always reply if you send me an email, send a submission through the form. I'll get back to you and be honest as well, in the nicest possible way. Like I say, not everything that we receive is what we're looking for. We don't really do horror yet. I receive a lot of horror scripts, so there's some emails that unfortunately we're not really looking for that right now. But just reach out, make a connection, meet somebody at a festival, say hello. I think for me, it's more than just about money. As a producer, you'll find a way to raise the funds for the project if you're the right fit, and if there's a working relationship between yourself and the other creative team. But there has to be that relationship in place first.
Thida was asking a question, or rather one that she thought other people might want to know, whether people submit pilots. Now, I think what she was referring to, because you don't necessarily do TV, do you? But I think she might be referring to treatments, maybe, or she could be referring to pilots as in, like I mentioned earlier, like a crowdfunding 2-minute version of films. Do you get what people call pilots? Do you get submissions? Yeah. You do. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, sometimes people do send us pilots, whether that's a pilot script, pilot little episode that they've made. We are looking to work on series as well at some point in time. Sometimes it's worth sending those pilots, and it depends on your project, right? Is it always worth going out and filming that and spending the money on it? Yes and no. It depends what you feel like you need to sell your film. If you want to really communicate a visual idea, then I find a pilot's quite useful for that. There's no one way. I know that's an awkward thing when when people are looking, how do I do this? You always ask yourself the question, but there isn't a rule. When you're sending me an email, whether it's a project in script format, through a treatment, through a pilot, you look at whatever that is for the stage that project's at, and either that's going to be a project you may be looking for, or maybe it's something that you want to develop a bit further, or maybe it's something that doesn't quite fit with your slate. And that's not to say anything about that individual project. It might be a great project, it might just not fit with what you need, what you're working on at the moment. And as you were saying earlier, we all have limited time, so you do have to be quite selective over the projects that you pick up and work on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I get it. And so if someone was to ask you, like, let's just say you were at Cannes or somewhere, and there was 3 people exactly like you, 3 production companies, same size, exactly the same shorts and features under their sleeve, up this, they've done all these. What do you think makes Flyer Films perhaps stand out? Is it because you like one of the things I'm guessing is the fact that you're happy to and you want to work with good causes like the diabetes film. I mean that might have come about a different way, but it came about nonetheless. And what is it that you say that sort of makes Flyer Films sort of want to produce a film or fund a film? Is it even to do with the name Flyer Films? Because where did that come from? I don't even know where that came from. So maybe you could answer.
That's many questions in many different ways. I think our USP really is international experience and knowledge at the moment. Because we work domestically in Canada, domestically in the UK, we can bring something to the table that is different to a lot of other production companies in being able to understand those tax regulations and laws. A lot of the regulations in Canada are also in French. For service production in Quebec, they're translated into English. For co-production, they're not. So to be able to understand that as a British producer is quite key and important, because you can make decisions in a second country that affect your ability to claim tax relief or funding in another country. So when you're setting up a bigger project, it's very important that all sides have that symbiotic relationship and work together in order to make it work everywhere. Co-production is one of those things that has to work for everybody or it works for nobody. So I think that's our real USP, is that we can bring that understanding and knowledge and have that that cohesion between our team, both on the UK side and on the Canadian or the international side. In terms of our films, what makes our films unique? All of our films are based in real life stories, true stories, if you like. They're all fictionalized, so it's not based on one individual event. But as you say, with Standstill, it's essentially based on the writer's biggest fear. She has diabetes, and her biggest fear of being stuck and kind of helpless, and how other people treat you in that situation. We made another film about agoraphobia, which is based on the experiences of one of our good friends in a play that we know very well. We made that through lockdown with a really good team of people who we all had no work at the time because it was that early stages, and we wrote this film for the Uncertain Kingdom Fund, and it was a finalist there. It didn't quite get funding, but we made it anyway because we felt like it was a very important story to tell. We've made comedies. Last film's a romantic comedy about 2 long-lost lovers that re-meet back in their 80s, and they try and rekindle their relationship when they meet in this care home situation, keep getting interrupted by people coming in and out. So that's us in between. Coming to a festival near you soon. We only finished that back in January, February, so that's still very new. So we've made all sorts of different films, really, but all of them are rooted in a real life story.
Okay.
So I mentioned a little bit about my history before. I came from, I studied aeronautical engineering and then went into the automotive industry. I left there in 2014 and retrained to be a commercial pilot. So I still fly aeroplanes every now and again with people going on their holidays. So we were sat down trying to think of a name, and it came out of the woodwork, and it was quite apt, really. That I like alliteration too. Who doesn't like a good alliterative name?
Yeah, I love wordplay, alliterations. A couple of questions that come to mind since then. So let's just say if someone was making a film, but funding-wise they're okay, pretty much, but sponsorship-wise, can they come to? I mean, you might not have gone down this avenue yet, but can they come to you specifically for that, to approach a sponsor? And I don't mean necessarily like a charity. I mean, I don't know, a big brand or something.
I think
something you touched on or helped out on.
It depends on the film as to what's best, what works in that sense. Say funding isn't a one size fits all approach. Every film will be different. Sponsorship, companies, and brands happens. People like the Wellcome Trust even have a fund, and that's kind of for medical style films. There's different organizations that set up different funds for different purposes. It depends what fits the film and what goes into the finance strategy ultimately. As a producer, we build that strategy in advance and then work towards getting the budget together. So in terms of coming to us solely for sponsorship, it's not really something that we'd be looking to do. We come on board as a production company and we'll build we'll build the finance plan for the film. So that might include sponsorship, and we might approach a brand or a company for money, but it really depends on the film and how it fits with their issue and their aesthetic. I've seen it happen a lot more in documentary space than in fiction, where I don't know, climbing documentary gets sponsorship from an equipment company because they're going to use all of their equipment as part of the film. So it can work in that sense. In fiction, it's a little less common. It does happen through branded film. We don't do very much of that anymore. We've done a couple in the past, but it just depends on the actual project itself.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And I was thinking something myself. Like I put my last film, Reparation, together almost myself, with a team, actors and crew, and it was a 30-minute drama. It touched on loss and various different topics. But I was going to say that there's a point where you have everything you need, you have all the parts you need, all the footage is there, but you perhaps need an editor or someone to refine it. So yes, you can go and look for an editor, but again, it's not something you would do. If you were to help with the funding to find an editor, can you get involved in that post-production stage? Or
for us, we manage the whole project from start to end. So
from day one,
pick something up in late development, take it through pre-production, production, and into distribution, because we'll recoup our part of our fees, essentially, the production company fee, producer fees, how you get paid as a producer from the production budget, but also through the back end in terms of sales. So we do editing. As you can see, I'm in our studio right now, actually. So we have our own editing facility. So we've edited a couple of our films in here. So we do that, but we generally wouldn't start a project. We wouldn't go into production without having an editor on board, for sure. You'd have the editor.
And
a lot of the time, even on set, because they can inform how you shoot. And there's often an on-set editor as well who's cutting the footage as you're filming it, so that you can do it back in dailies. It depends on the scale of the project as to whether you can afford that. And obviously, some smaller projects you can't afford that on-set person. But on the bigger projects, there's a DIT on-set editor, and even, as I say, the main film editor might be there to give some advice, especially if it's a particularly difficult scene or you're trying to do VFX or something like that. You might bring the VFX person in to actually set up the shot, plates, and to make sure you've got the right material. It's expensive to go back and reshoot. It happens, but you try and avoid it.
It's a mixture of pre and post planning sort of thing.
I think for me, as a producer, it's very important to bring post-production into production as well. So to really think about your post-production process while you're filming, because you can't just go and fix everything in post. What you shot is what you shot. And
I know.
You don't want to get to the editing room and find that what you shot's entirely useless. And you go, we'll just fix that later, especially with sound. The most important thing. Obviously, you can do ADR, you can go and re-record sound, you can do wild takes, things like that, but it's hard. If you can get it right the first time, especially with location sound, then you're on to a winner.
Yeah, and so I think you said this just now, that you'd rather be there from day one, and the funding begins, all that begins at the beginning, but you said even at late development. So what would you class as late development?
So late development.
So the script is done.
Yep.
Let's just say that's quite late.
Yep.
But also they've maybe done something else, started getting actors maybe, or would it?
Yeah, not so much necessarily getting the acting talent on board. Late development for us is often where we're working with another production company, and like you say, the script's been developed to a good level already. We'll come on board at the end of that process, maybe the last couple of drafts, and tweak it to fit what we're adding as well. So there's always a room for a change there, but maybe they've got some funding on board as a producer as well. You know, part of the budget's already confirmed, whether that's in local funding through a national body, or whether that's in pre-sales, or however that might be. We'd come on board slightly later on in that development process, rather than starting with an idea and saying, okay, I'm going to go and employ a writer at day one to write the first draft of the script and then develop the full script. We can come on board a little bit later than that, after there's already a script in place and a good idea of what's happening. You know, the project already has quite a lot of meat on it at that time, and then we come in to structure the project pre-starting pre-production. So there's a subtle distinction between development and pre-production. Once you know you've got all the money in place, you can then choose to go to pre-production. There's a definition of that from tax legislation as well, in that you can claim costs for pre-production but not from development, broadly speaking, in order to calculate your access to film tax relief. So we come in right at the back end of that development and then take it through pre-production, production, and post, and then into distribution. So that's the bit that we work on.
And have you ever had any, I mean, on the, you know, you've done a handful of films and they're quite, you know, you've had success. Have you had any where you wanted to tweak certain things in the story, because, you know, it's not necessarily a final draft, but almost, but the writer, and who might be the director as well, I don't know, said no. You know, have you ever had any sort of artistic differences? He or she wants to keep something, and or has it been quite amicable mostly?
I think that comes up in every project, really. Yeah, everybody's different. So film is an industry of what people like, really. Film's an industry of preference. So sometimes you have an idea, they have an idea. I think the biggest thing on both sides of the table is to be open to other people's suggestions and ideas. That's not to say that you necessarily take everything forwards, but I think it's good to have a healthy debate about ideas and say, hey, how about we do this bit differently? And how about we do this bit like this instead of like that? And you have those discussions as a team, and ultimately you'll come to a decision as a team as to how the project moves forward. It's ultimately the producer owns the film, but I think it's important that everybody has their say in that process, and everybody has a different opinion, but also a different set of experience in life and in the industry, and knows what works differently. So everybody has an opinion, whether that's the sales agent, whether it's producer, whether it's the writer, the director. You know, there's so many different pieces of the puzzle coming together that have to be resolved as you go into production. And that's why a lot of time is spent in pre-production and building, you know, your shot planning and storyboarding and scene mapping and blocking and all of these different elements. Even post having a script, you might have a script, and even the actor will come in and say, hey, you know, I wouldn't say that quite like that. How about we say it like this? And so you'll change it because it feels more natural to them, and therefore as a performance it comes across as more natural. You can't even change that on the day on set with the director. But things morph, and nothing's ever totally fixed and set in stone.
It's a collaborative process in more than one way. It's not just collaborative because you're all doing different things on the same set and you know, on the same script. Even it's collaborative because you're meant to meet halfway. But you do hear the bigger studios, you know, say that film ends too sad. You need a happier, you know, close to the film. That kind of thing. I wondered if
Yeah,
and smaller.
it doesn't matter. I don't think on the size of production, you still have those discussions, and even what you thought might have come across in one way might, when you filmed it, actually come across in a totally different way. So you have to rewrite. I always say there's 4 or 5 different stages of writing the film. When you first start out with an idea, then you write a script, then the director gets on board, you rewrite it there, and the actor comes in, they rewrite it a little bit. You rewrite it slightly when you're shooting it, you rewrite it when you edit it. So there's a number of different stages of rewriting, and that collaboration process, as a producer, you're always involved in that because it's your IP and it's your product that you're making at the end of the day. But there are so many advisors, if you like, other people and collaborators and really experts in their field that have way more ideas about what they're doing than I do. I'm not a director. It's amazing for me watching a film come together and be something that's the sum of greater than its parts, something that's bigger than even that I could imagine when I was reading it in the first place. That's the special feeling for me.
I've been as you know, I've been away for almost 10 months, and I've had at least 6 fiction ideas, and I've started scripts on most of those. And of course, I think I was listening to an interview the other day, Tarantino, and when he started out, I'm not comparing myself to him, but he said that he had all these projects started, all these scripts he hadn't finished. It's not because he didn't know how to finish. It's because you get an idea, you start it, but then you get another idea which is better, but the next one is better because it is at the time it's better because it's fresh. But what I was going to say was, at the moment, where I am right now is someone I've been meeting every day at breakfast, and we were talking. Now we're just shooting some random scenes for a film that might get finished. In other words, I'm going to take all those scenes away. I've got a rough script in my mind, and we're meeting each other for a couple of hours every day, doing our own stuff. I'm doing my stuff, they're doing their stuff, having breakfast and what have you. And we just decided to shoot some scenes that might work in my vision up here. So the reason I'm saying that is because it doesn't even have a script, but it is, even when it does have a script, like you were saying, it comes together more so in the edit. And that happened a lot with my last film. I had to change stuff, and the shooting went very much to the script, but then the edit, I made, there were certain things I made it a bit more sort of artsy in places, but in other places it was more formulaic maybe. And so it's amazing how the editing process, they always say that, don't they, that if you learn editing, it's a good way into knowing how to make a film. How to write a film, because you're structuring it. And I'm mostly self-taught, so it's a learning curve for me. But I wouldn't have a clue at the funding. I funded the stuff myself, and I've 20 or more years I had ideas, I put them to one side because I didn't have the confidence, and I hadn't been to film school, and I now the thought of writing off to the BBC and getting rejected 25 years ago was awful, so I put it away in a drawer. And it's great now that you've got these independent companies like yours and other ones that do help all different sizes of production. You're not just thinking, I'm never going to get to Hollywood, which I don't necessarily want to get to Hollywood now, but back then, but now I can actually collaborate and talk to this producer who's on the same level, lower budget maybe, and human stories, and even stories with a cause like yours and mine.
I think what you talked about there about rejection and the feeling of rejection is very real. It doesn't matter what stage of the industry you're at, whether you were working on a small project, a big project, it really doesn't matter. Rejection always feels bad, but it's a process that you have to go through in order to get success. For every 10 things that you send out, 9 of them will say no, and 1 might say maybe, and then that maybe you'll follow through to another conversation, and then you'll build a relationship, and actually eventually it'll turn into a yes. It's very rarely a yes at minute one. It would be probably possibly unrealistic to expect to walk into a room, ask somebody for £1 million, and then go, yeah, all right, here you go. It feels a bit that way when you see interviews with bigger studios and people. Oh, how did you do it? Oh, well, I just went and asked. It does happen really rarely, but that just going and asking is a product of a relationship that they've built over many, many years, whether that's through their family or other things, or film school, or just going out and meeting people at festivals, or whatever it might be. It's very important to develop those relationships, and it's from those relationships that your success and your yeses are going to come from. Pitching blind.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good words, actually. I mean, I was just thinking, because even when you've done the film and you have made a film, which I think anyone can make a film, you know, big or small, but you've done it, then you've got the festival rejection, you know. It's like, you know, and then one lucky one, and then 2 and 3, but then no more. Then you have to stop at some point, you know. You think, right.
And I think that's particularly hard for a filmmaker. I think that festival rejection is particularly hard for a filmmaker, because especially if it's your baby and you've made it and it's everything that you wanted it to be and you think it's phenomenal, and then you keep getting these rejections in your inbox from festivals. That's tough, because it's like somebody's actually telling you that you're not worthy. So I think one of the most important things for me is, as a producer, not that I don't care about the film, but I'm more used to getting that in my inbox and I just ignore it these days. So for me, I always take the director and the writer of that process. I'll just tell them when we get selected somewhere.
Yeah, well, actually, I've just
No, then all they see is yes. They have no idea about the no's. They know the no's exist. They just don't know specifics. But it's nice to have that layer of separation between ultimately myself, who's more of the business side of the filmmaking, and the creative, because it's not ultimately ever really my idea or my origination. So I don't feel so close to the project that really upsets me. And I think to protect somebody's mental health is massively important, especially in these days. Mental health of filmmakers is very tough. And we've all got stuff going on. Rejection is a big part of that. And so I think if you can find yourself somebody that'll help you with distribution and help protect you from that at each stage, that's key, really.
Actually, I've got 2 little things to say on that about the rejection again, because I think we've only got a few minutes left again. One is that it's almost self-rejection to start with, because you write it and you think, oh, this is not going to be made, you know. So there's always that little thing, you know. Even when you finish it, you think this is great, but it's not going to get made. But also a story or anecdote or something. Recently, I've got, you know, a couple of other festivals accept my film, but there's a lot of festivals out there that aren't necessarily legit. There's a lot in India and other countries, and okay. And I suddenly got this. I got like these 3 wins from a certain festival, like best editor, best trailer, which I was happy with. I am proud of the trailer, and best experimental film or something. And I was thinking, this is too, you know. I was thinking this is one of those festivals that's taken your money. You've applied in categories, and they then dish them out because they've got the money. You know, there's a lot of that going on. As in, you pay for your category, and you basically win it or runner up. But I kept thinking, I posted on Facebook, I was happy, but I was also doubting, thinking, you know, is this a real award, or this is just, you know. And it wasn't until one of my friends, who's a cineast and a Korean film expert, much more than me, and mine is not a Korean film, but it's got Korean language and Korean characters. And he said, well done, on my post. And I think, oh, I didn't think you'd watched it, because I sent him a screener a while ago and he hadn't replied. And I messaged him and said, oh, you said well deserved. So you have seen it? And he went, yes, I've 3 times. I was really impressed. So that means more to me than whether that festival was a fake. You know what I mean? Because I suddenly realized this guy that I almost idolize in his film, you know, what he appreciates as cinema, was more important than these. Hopefully that film festival's not listening, but it's, you know, it's just, it's amazing because that was a rejection, because I kept thinking it's an acceptance, it's appreciation, but really I don't think, was it underward, was it real? But if someone else said it, and then that was real, that was where the real praise was. So you're right, rejection comes at every stage. So
there are
and speaking,
there are some of those festivals where you might feel like it's not as worthy as others. But in reality, I think as a filmmaker, if you have submitted to whatever festival it is, you've done your research on it, you've done the submission, you've paid your money for whatever reason that might be, I think you really have to be proud of whatever comes out of that. If you get selected, you win a prize, do shout about it. Why not, Because there will be a person behind that has actually watched your film and appreciated it. However big or small that festival might be, there is that level of appreciation, and I understand that it sometimes feels more important from people that you know and respect. Most 99.9% of the time, those festivals are run by well-known or established filmmakers and people that you would respect. Did you know them? You just don't have that relationship with them.
Yeah.
So
I just come across some that are almost copy and paste. The category is the description, and it's their first year, and they're taking money. And I've been involved with submitting. So, there's a lot of coincidences, but I know, there was I can tell you this another time because it's probably not relevant, but it's,
I think you got to draw the line at where you keep beating yourself up though. I think the more confidence you can have in your project, sometimes the more successful it is. And be proud of what you've made. You've made something, it's hard work. It doesn't matter what you've made, whether it's 10 million, 100 million, or £10. It's taken you a lot of hard work to put that on the screen, and I think being proud of that's important.
No, go back. But it's like they say though, some directors, and I can understand why, they make one film and that's it, because it does break you. Just the whole process when it can break you to sort of But thankfully, I have the ideas. It's not just I went to film school and I want to get my teeth into something. It's the ideas that keep going. To me, they become a burden. I wish I had no creativity in that way, because I know I'm probably spoiled, but you sometimes, if I can see why some filmmakers and how they feel, because you feel like, God, that's been 2 years. Mine happened in COVID. Mine was made through COVID from the start to beginning, from the start to finish. And, I can see why people go, God, not again,
Absolutely.
That's why producers are good.
Yeah. We often are that filtering layer between the creative and the business side, which can be quite harsh. It feels like judgment on your project. And as I said before, film's an industry of preference, and even blockbuster films, I'm not going to like the same things that you like and vice versa, but there is a market for pretty much anything, so somebody will like it.
Yeah. All right, well, I think there's only a couple of minutes left of this, and we have been talking for probably an hour and a half, which is good. And if we get any questions, based on this, or even myself and Thida come up with some other things that we want to ask you, maybe we can have a follow-up one in the future.
Sure. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. It's been a pleasure.
Maybe even an in-person one. We won't have the Zoom problems then.
Good to see you, Jason.
You've been listening to the MBF-Micro-Budget Filmmakers podcast. If you'd like to hear more of these episodes and check out any you may have missed, please subscribe via Spreaker or wherever you get your podcast fix. And if you want to continue to have access to filmmaker tips, events, and exclusive interviews, do sign up for the next Micro-Budget Filmmakers newsletter. You'll be able to read exclusive interviews, attend workshops, and ultimately mingle with like-minded creative folk, as well as speak to more great people in the world of film.